Hello, my name is Phoenix, and in this video I'm going to be discussing the role of magic in the Wiccan belief. So first of all, I think it's important to take a look at the word witch itself. The word witch is generally roughly defined as someone who practices magic or sorcery or spellcraft. But the word witch has its origins in Old English and was originally the word Wicca or Wiki. So clearly there is a very strong connection between Wicca and witchcraft, or the practice of magic. Many people think of Wicca as the same as witchcraft. However, I would disagree with that because Wicca is a religious belief system and not just the practice of magic. Some people try to separate the religion of Wicca from the practice of magic. However, I don't really think that it's possible to separate the two. The origins of Wicca. Wicca claims to be a earth-based spirituality that is a continuation of ancient pagan religious beliefs. The validity of such claims is questionable. However, modern Wicca arose in the early 1950s and has since then become a worldwide religious movement. So, how does Wicca, the religion, involve magic, the practice? The Wiccan religion consists of two principal forms of religious devotion and practice, which is the Sabbats, or the sun festivals, and the Esbats, or the moon festivals. The Sabbats are generally under the domain of the sun god and the masculine energy and the changing seasons, whereas the Esbats are more focused on the moon and the moon phases and the goddess and the feminine aspect of the divine force. So, Wiccans honor the god and goddess through these two different types of celebrations, and the way that they do so involves magical practices. A typical Sabbat celebration consists of casting the circle, calling the quarters, and then enacting a seasonal motif or a seasonal play, or having some kind of talk about the season or the changing season, which depends on which of the 8 Sabbats are being celebrated. The act of casting a circle and calling the quarters is actually a form of magic. Now, how is magic defined? I like to use Aleister Crowley's famous definition of magic as being creating change in accordance with will. However, I like to add an extra little bit onto that and consider magic to be creating change in accordance with will through the manipulation of subtle energies. So, the magic circle is a psychological construct, if you will, from a scientific perspective, that alters the emotional headspace or the emotional headspace that participants are in. So that is creating a change. It may be an internal change, but nevertheless it's a change. When one invokes the quarters, they are essentially pulling the 4 directions from all corners of the universe and bringing them into the circle. That is also a form of energy manipulation, which brings about a change. It may be emotional, it may be psychological, but nevertheless there is a change in the participants that are performing these rites. So, the general Sabbat layout conforms pretty well to the definition of magic as portrayed by Aleister Crowley. Now, when we look at Esbats, they get a lot more magical than the Sabbats do. First of all, the Esbat usually involves an act of spellcraft after or during the ritual. So an Esbat's main focus is to honor the goddess and the divine feminine, but again, it involves casting a circle and calling the quarters. Some witches don't do the quarter calls or circle casting. However, it is a traditional part of Wicca, the religion, regardless of what tradition you're practicing. Another pivotal part of an Esbat celebration is the act of calling down the moon. If you're in a group environment, usually the high priestess will do this. However, if you're a solitary, calling down the moon is a very intimate, personal experience between you and the goddess. I remember calling down the moon when I was a child, before I actually realized what I was doing. It was just kind of something I instinctually felt drawn to do, and then after I had learned about the craft, I realized that what I had been doing all these years was actually a modified form of an Esbat. So calling down the moon involves taking the essence of the moon energy and pulling it in through the crown of your head into your physical form and merging with it, becoming one with it. Now after the priestess or whoever's doing it calls down the moon into them, they usually use this energy to channel out into spellcraft or to other members of the group, or they bring through channeled messages from the divine, and there's all different kinds of directions that this practice can flow into. Calling down the moon itself is a very powerful spiritual experience, just as it is. You can think of calling down the moon as invoking a spirit, becoming possessed by something, except you have a little bit more control. How much of the moon you pull into you is pretty much up to the individual. But nevertheless, calling down the moon involves pulling the moon's essence and energy and force into your being and into your body and channeling it through you, usually to create change. Again, we see the same principle of creating change in accordance with will through the manipulation of subtle energies in both of these practices. So, that being said, Esbats and Sabbats are the cornerstones of Wiccan religious practice and Wiccan devotions. Wiccans generally don't go to church every Sunday. The Sabbats and Esbats are very sacred, important times in our religious practice. And the fact that these two practices are so closely linked and intertwined with magic really goes to highlight the importance that magic itself has in the Wiccan faith. I hope you have enjoyed this video about magic and Wicca.